Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with a video to discuss one of probably the most underpowered or most useless units in the game in the current meta, the Steam Tank. And this video is a little bit of a dual purpose. I do want to discuss the Steam Tank. I also have a few little things I want to discuss for the upcoming week because I will not be uploading quite as regularly in this upcoming week. I'm going to miss a few days. But first and foremost, I did want to discuss the Steam Tank. And so recently, I've been kind of thinking it's one of the, there's a few units in Total War Warhammer. I think for most part, yeah, there are units that are niche. There are units that are sort of core, and you'll almost always see units that you'll see rarely, but have their sort of special circumstances or special builds that can make them function, and where they actually are very competitive. The Steam Tank is not one of those units. It's one of the very few units in this game that I think is really not very competitive at all. If I was to rate it, there's only really a few units that are equally bad when drawn up against the Steam Tank. I would say that gyro bombers are pretty bad. Probably about on the same level as a Steam Tank as far as overpriced and being inefficient goes. But I can't really think of much else. Most factions, even their stinker units or their not so good units, are still more viable than a Steam Tank. And you might say, well, yeah, but you can still use a Steam Tank, and of course that is true. But I do want to discuss first and foremost what makes the Steam Tank bad, and then how this could be rectified, and why the Steam Tank is currently bad. So the Steam Tank is basically the Empire Uber unit. We all know this. It's super expensive. It's supposed to be a tank. It's supposed to be very survivable. It's monstrous armor sitting at 160. Reflects that. It's supposed to be an absolute beast, really tough to kill, and a bit of a tar pit unit. It's got unbreakable. It's got fear. It's got terror. Likely just because that 160 armor. It's a pretty small hitbox, so it's supposed to, so it's hard to surround with enough troops. It's difficult to snipe down with artillery. Because unlike, say, a giant or an Ragnarok or a mammoth, it doesn't present the same monstrous frontal profile that a lot of those units do. So, and it still packs a cannon, so it's got some artillery firepower. So on paper, and plus it's got AP, it's got some anti-infantry, so on paper it should technically be decent. But the thing is, in practice, it just is not. And this is for a few reasons. One, it's incredibly expensive. It costs 2,200 gold. As a point of reference here, I'm actually bringing a Stegodon in as to give you guys some idea of how it stacks up against a unit that's a lot cheaper. Keep in mind, the Stegodon is not simply like 100 gold cheaper. It's not the same price. The Stegodon is 500 gold cheaper. The Stegodon is 1,700 gold. And compare the stats. Stegodon has barely weaker range damage. It also causes fear and terror. It only has 120 armor, which might seem like a bit of an issue, but it has much higher melee defense than the Steam Tank, much higher weapon strength, which means it's able to kill units the Steam Tank cannot kill. It's got missile resistance, which means it's arguably, especially against AP shooting, it's actually tankier against that sort of stuff than the Steam Tank is. It still has that respectable 120 armor, and more importantly, it's got melee defense. The Steam Tank does not have almost any melee defense. It's got 10, which is literally just nominal sort of amount. Even zombies will be hitting pretty consistently against that. So this is the first issue. The Steam Tank, for its current stats, is overpriced. However, it's not simply an issue of overpriced, it's also simply an issue of the fact that the Steam Tank doesn't really deliver that much performance. What does it do? It's supposed to be a tar pit, except for a tar pit unit is incredibly pricey. It costs 2,200. For that sort of price, you can bring flagellants. You can bring almost 4 units of flagellants. And flagellants are already considered a bit overpriced by many. I'm not entirely sure I actually agree with that assessment, but all that aside, flagellants you can get several more flagellants. So you can say, yeah, but the Steam Tank is tankier than flagellants. Yeah, the Steam Tank is tankier than a single unit of flagellants against quite a few units, but you can't cover as much area with a Steam Tank. A Steam Tank can, let's say, plug a gap against a single infantry unit. Well, that means that all around it, you can still flank around the Steam Tank. You can bog a Steam Tank down with an unbreakable unit of your own, some dirt sheep, for example, the Night Goblin Fanatics, the AP Cloonies. You can bog a Steam Tank down with those and run around it and slaughter the Empire army behind them. You can't do that with flagellants. Flagellants, you can spread them out. You've got much more area coverage. If you bring the Steam Tank to have a bit of an artillery piece, it costs 3 times as much as a cannon battery and only delivers the same damage per minute as 2 cannons. It's not you get 3 times you get not just 3 times the damage output. You're getting if you bring 3 cannon batteries in exchange for a steam tank, which is roughly it's a little more expensive, but you get 9 guns firing. The steam tank only fires worth 2 guns, so it's like 4.5 times. It's a huge difference in how much DPS range DPS you're getting, and the steam tank, once it gets bogged down in melee, it's no more able to fire its cannon than a normal cannon battery is. So that's another huge issue. Then there's the issue of actual survivability. So okay, so the steam tank isn't that good at killing. You're not really bringing it to kill. Okay, it's not that great at covering at all angles, but okay, so it doesn't do all that. That's okay, right? It's tanky. It's almost indestructible. It's got 160 armor. It's got small profile, all that sort of stuff. Well, no, it actually isn't all that survivable. Despite being unbreakable, despite having fear, terror, despite having 160 armor and melee, it's not very survivable at all. And this comes down to a few reasons. One, first and foremost, is the fact that it has no melee defense. This is, in my opinion, the biggest issue, but not the only issue here. Well, actually, I wouldn't even say. I'm not. You know what? I'm not actually sure this is the biggest issue, but it was one big issue. Everything hits the steam tank. Now, sure, they have to kill the steam tank to the last little bit of HP, but every little bit, basically every single hit or aim at the steam tank is going through. It's hitting. It's doing some damage. If the steam tank gets surrounded by units that have AP damage, it goes down like a 9-pin. Getting a unit of Blackworks on a steam tank, it is not lasting long for this world. Getting a unit of AP cavalry on a steam tank, and it is completely screwed. Its melee attack is actually not very good either. It sure has a decent charge bonus, but with very low weapon strength of only 180, even with that bonus versus infantry, it's not doing a lot of damage. It doesn't have that much splash. It kind of jerks around and bumps into units, but it really doesn't do very much. The steam gun on top, which people sometimes reference, and looks like it does similar damage and should be doing additional damage in melee, actually has a terrible weapon strength. It's something like, I do believe someone found the exact stats for it, and something like 20 damage per hit. And it does have limited ammo. It's got like 200 ammo, but the ammo is actually limited, which is atrocious. That's not even comparable to the steam gun on the gyrocopter. And keep in mind, this is a 2,200 gold investment. This is the second most expensive unit in the game currently, or second most expensive standard unit, I do believe, which is pretty darn ludicrous. Actually, maybe I forget I think I forgot the mammoth with the mammoth with the war shrine, so I think it might be the third. But it's one of the most expensive units in the game. It's second or third right now, and it is not at all and it isn't really able to kill units in melee. So you might say, well, that doesn't have anything to do with survivability. Well, it kind of does, because if you're able to kill the enemy before they're able to kill you in close quarters, then that's good. That means you're a bit more survivable. That means you can, say, rout them off and stuff like that. So it has 160 armor. That's its main source of survivability. That and being small. The thing is, 160 armor. Okay, so 160 armor on paper is good. That means that 75% of attacks made against you do 0 of their AP damage. 25% of them are doing 20% at most, and that's still a very large stretch. Even the majority of those attacks are not going to be doing 20% of their non-AP damage. They're going to be doing even less. So on paper, that seems decent. Okay, yeah, sure, but here's the other problem. The steam tank suffers vigor loss. Right now you can see it's fresh. If we start firing, say, at those goblins or Grimgor or whatever, we will swiftly start seeing it drop in vigor. The steam tank drops, and once you reach the exhausted state, sure, it debuffs all your other stats. It debuffs melee attack, melee defense, blah, 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 all those things, which is, for the steam tank, basically irrelevant. But it debuffs armor. And when a unit hits exhaustion point, the steam tank loses 35% of its armor, which for a unit whose only source of survivability is its 160 armor, is an absolute disaster. It means the steam tank drops to 104 effective armor. It means it's getting completely torn apart by even non-AP units at that point. And of course, because it hasn't been killing these units very effectively up to this point, by the time it's reached that very tired and exhausted state, it hasn't really done much. It's not like a unit. I'm trying to think of other units that suffer in a protracted engagement. Let's say, there's plenty of other units that suffer in protracted engagements, Savage Orcs, all that sort of stuff. But they generally pay for themselves somehow up to that point. The steam tank does not, and it starts falling apart. It's not actually able to hold its own. And this is before we consider the fact that armor is irrelevant against AP units, or basically irrelevant against AP units. Normal infantry with AP, so or infantry shooting with AP is monstrous against the steam tank. It completely annihilates it. Handguns, thunders, starfire shafts, the Sisters of Averlorn with whatever their shots are supposed to be. They'll destroy steam tanks in seconds. It's not really a contest. Literally just a few volleys. Way Watchers, of course, just destroy steam tanks. Even small arms, essentially small arms to devastate steam tanks. And it's a pretty disastrous thing there. Now, artillery is not that good against steam tanks because it tends to miss because the steam tank, like I just said before, is pretty small. But everything else, and then infantry or cavalry with AP or anti-large, monsters with AP will just tear apart a steam tank. It's basically just a garbage unit. And so that's everything that's wrong with the steam tank. It suffers vigor loss. It's got no real sort of survivability. It doesn't really dish out damage. It doesn't have enough area coverage. It basically doesn't do anything well. And it's an elite unit, top tier unit that should be good at something. So what should it be good at? Well, it should be good at surviving. This is it's a tank. Its gimmick is supposed to be the fact that it survives. And its second thing is really supposed to be that if it's getting surrounded by crappy chaff troops, it should be near indestructible. So Goblin, and to an extent, this is the truth, but only very slightly. It's not like it devastates units of swishy infantry, which I think the steam tank should be much better against. It should be much more capable of just rampaging through them, and these units should be getting destroyed. So there's a few fixes here that I want to discuss, pitch out to you guys, and sort of share my thoughts on the issue. And some of these I did take from the official forums. Some of them I've kind of thought up on my own. But regardless, going through, the first and foremost suggestion, of course, that I've seen, and this one I don't really agree with, is dropping the price. Now, this was a huge boon for the Luminarch. The Luminarch went down in price significantly and instantly became a much more viable pick. It's still a one-shot wonder, essentially. It's still very much dedicated to sniping single models, which, okay, that's a niche pick, but it has become a niche pick. It is now a niche pick that is viable in a lot of matchups, which is great. Steam Tank, it costs 2,200. There's no way in heck it's really able to pay for itself. It's basically never pays for itself. So and you can win games with it, but it's not paying for itself. So it would have to drop a lot in price, in my opinion. And when I say a lot, I mean probably 500. It would need to drop to at least the level of the Luminarch currently, and probably lower, because otherwise it just has no valid reason to be utilized. It is just a pretty freaking terrible unit. For the cost of the steam tank, you can bring a unit of cannons and Demigryph Knights with halberds, and essentially that gives you a unit of 2 flagellants and a cannon, and have some change to spare. Steam tank just doesn't do its job. Simple as that. Now, then there are proposals for buffs to the steam tank, and this is what I would much rather like to see. I feel like the steam tank should be in a niche situation, an absolute menace on the battlefield. It should be an awesome unit that can actually be a game changer, that can actually have a serious impact if utilized correctly. It is, after all, a unit that is supposed to be the top tier Empire piece of technology. It is supposed to be one of the sort of greatest innovations the Empire has. It's supposed to be their equivalent of monsters, where the Empire is doesn't really have the monstrous capability of other factions. They've got technology. They've got a tank. So, first proposal I've seen, and this one I'm actually don't really have a problem with, is a simple ward save of some sort. It could be a basic ward save. It could be a physical ward save. It could be resistance to missile damage. Any of those three I agree with. Personally, what I would like to see is what I think I would like to see is either just a flat ward save or a physical ward save. The reason I don't want the missile ward save necessarily is because was another proposal that I really liked that I would like to bring up, specifically for missiles. I think a normal ward save would honestly just be the best thing, because this way the tank would become actually much tankier, even against AP units. After all, so there's armor piercing and there's armor piercing. The tank does, after all, have just a massive slab of armor, goodness knows how many inches thick, on the front. If you look here, you can actually see kind of some of the thickness of those plates. It's not like a 3mm chest plate or whatever the knights are wearing. It is monstrous. It is a monstrous slab of steel on the front of the tank. So some sort of ward save I think is definitely justifiable. I see no reason why there should be no ward save. What sort of ward save is a bit of a toss-up, and this is really where these next proposals come in to play. The first one is a proposal to give it a gold shield. This is actually something I like a lot, because the steam tank has all this monstrous armor in the front. I feel that it should be, and it should be basically invulnerable to small arms. I think that cannons and big artillery should still be very much potent against the steam tank. It is, after all, yes, this is very thick steel, but let's say then you can sort of concuss. You can make all sorts of reasons for why very big guns could be messing up a steam tank. But at the same time, small arms I don't really think should be capable of punching through the steam tank's front. I think a 70 to 80% shield would be completely reasonable, leaving, of course, obviously some shots could go into some weak spots. The tank does have its own weaknesses, but 70 to 80% shield I think would be completely reasonable on the steam tank. It would make it much more tanky against small arms and would give it a bit of a niche once again to deal with. If you're trying to deal with wood elves, for example, it could be something that helps counteract Way Watchers. Currently, that's one of the tougher matchups for Empire. This would actually be a nifty thing. The steam tank, if it's actually able to soak up missiles with a gold shield, would be pretty crazy, especially if it's stacked on top of this ward save. The other thing that I've seen to improve survivability is dealing with that armor loss, which is ridiculous and really punishes the steam tank. Now you could say, well, vigor loss makes sense. The crew's squished inside. Obviously, the boiler might start overheating or falling apart or whatever because it doesn't exactly look fancy. Like, that doesn't exactly look in good shape. You could say the crew's getting exhausted because they're stuck in a steaming box. Yeah, all well and good. I do agree that honestly, the steam tank, I don't think that it should be completely immune to vigor loss, but I would like to see it given immunity to the loss of armor. The fact that it's easy to hit its weak spots in close quarters is already reflected by the fact that it has no melee defense. You could say in the case of infantry units, okay, it's getting a little bit easier to hit weak spots there because they're getting tired out, and at the same time, they might sort of, I don't know, you can make some arguments there that it is getting easier to sort of aim or hit critical weak spots in the armor, or that troops are ditching armor or whatever. But in the case of the steam tank, that's just not the case. It's a steel box. It shouldn't be losing armor. I would like to see it simply made immune to the armor loss from vigor. Everything else I think could stay on there to reflect the fact that the crew is getting exhausted. But I think the armor loss, it should be immune to the armor loss from vigor. Another proposal I do see sometimes, and I don't actually agree with this one really, is an immunity to poison. The reason I don't agree with this is because we already have poison affecting a lot of units where it doesn't make sense other than the steam tank. You can poison skeletons and zombies. That makes zero sense. If you can make up some sorry reason for why poison melts bones or something and works against skeletons, then why shouldn't it just be melting the spokes or something on a steam tank? It doesn't, like, at that point you can just make up whatever reason you want, but I don't really see a reason for why the steam tank should be immune to poison from just the gameplay standpoint. Logically, whatever, but there's already illogical situations with that, so I'd rather see that changed. And the final situation that I could see the steam tank, the final way I could really see the steam tank being buffed, and the thing that kind of I would like, and I'm thinking it wouldn't necessarily have to be one of these things. It could be a mix of these buffs. So keep that in mind. But the final thing that a sort of idea I had or thought would be cool is buffing the steam tank's damage in close quarters, specifically its damage against squishy units and its ability to sort of deal with mobs of infantry. One, I would like to see the steam gun on the top buffed to the same level as a steam gun on a gyrocopter. Take away some of the ammo if necessary. I'm fine with that. Okay, it's got like 200 rounds right now, but 200 rounds of doing nothing is completely pointless. So if it did like the 76 or whatever damage that the gyrocopter does, and had 100 rounds, keep in mind you're paying 2,200 for this unit. It's doing almost nothing in close quarters with its ramming attacks. If it's in close quarters, it's not using its cannon, and it's only worth about 2/3 of a gun battery. Keep in mind just how expensive this unit is when we're discussing this. It's a 2,200 gold unit. So I could see the steam gun being much more useful that way. You could sort of be melting infantry units much more effectively. A final little idea I had was onto tabletop. The steam tank had steam points. It generated steam points over the course of the game. Now, I wasn't a tabletop player, but I do know some of the rules. I've watched some gameplay of tabletop. I've read up quite a bit of the rules. So I've an idea of what the steam tank could do. And apparently it could vent steam, and like the idea was that it was venting steam around itself from the boilers. And I'm not sure if this was supposed to reflect. And this wasn't supposed to reflect the steam gun. The steam gun itself was a breath attack, and that would actually be another option. Would be to let it be a breath attack, which I'm not too keen on. I don't think it should be that powerful, to be honest. The steam gun. I do like the way it's currently implemented. I just wish it would actually do damage. But previously in the tabletop, the steam tank could vent steam around itself, and I think that would be pretty awesome. Currently, we have all these AOE's. that disrupt enemies nearby. You've got AOE's on, of course, Kroq-Gar on all this. On maybe not all, but some of the Skaven lords have. Some of the Skaven lords have. I forgot what what it's called, actually. It's just slipping my mind. Verminous Valor, there we go. A lot of the Skaven melee lords, they've got Verminous Valor. Of course, Kroq-Gar has Swiftness of Eitzel. Queen Khalida has her Venom Wave. Cetra has his Wrath of Drow, or whatever it is, the one that the AoE knockback. And so there's several instances of these sort of knockbacks already implemented into the game. And I think it would be cool if the Steam Tank had an AoE with a few charges where it just vents a bunch of steam around itself. And this would be more damage oriented and it wouldn't have much AP. But it would say hit an area, I don't know, about, maybe that's too big, but say in a 15-meter radius around the Steam Tank, there would be a burst of steam that just incinerates or boils infantry alive. And it wouldn't work well against armored infantry because currently other steam weapons don't do that. So for logic's sake, why? If you guys don't disagree, that's fine. But I would think it would be cool if it could do something like that. Regardless, these are my ideas on how the Steam Tank could be improved. Like I said, I sort of just proposals. I think the Steam Tank in its current state is an atrocious unit, and it's one of the few units in the game that I actually think is pretty terrible. There aren't many that I actually think are bad, but the Steam Tank is one of them, and I really wanted to sort of bring that up. So buffing the Steam Tank, I think, would be. These are my proposals essentially, and I would love to hear what you guys think. Obviously, there's no guarantee any of these will be implemented. I'd simply like to see the Steam Tank buffed, and hope if CA or whoever notices it would be great if they did. Yeah, it would be cool. There's plenty of ideas I think to make the Steam Tank great, and if you guys have any ideas of your own, be sure to share them. I'd love to hear. A second part of this little tidbit in this video is that I will not be casting or putting up games on the 17th or 18th. I'm going to be out camping for most of the weekend. I'm hoping to be back on the night of the 19th to put up a game. Probably not going to be casting a new one, but I've got some games that I'm going to cast and have them ready. So I just wanted you guys to be aware that I will not be putting up new games in those days. So yeah, I do understand that this was a little ranty, but this is something I'm really pretty passionate about. I love the game. This is one of the units that I think is absolutely awesome in aesthetics and in looks and theme and lore. And it just really falls flat on its face in this game, and it's something I would love to see rectified. I'd love to see the Steam Tank made great once more. So I do hope you guys enjoyed the video, despite the fact that it was a little ranty. Do keep in mind I might still remind in some other further videos but I won't be here for the 18th and the 17th and 18th. And thank you all for watching. Leave your comments down below, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.